Hello everyone. In this video, we will be discussing the Earth's carbon cycle. The main premise regarding the carbon cycle revolves around 3 points that I will address. The 3 points are where carbon is stored and how it is released, then how trees recycle carbon, and the ocean's carbon cycle. This video has been produced through Fortnite. I hope you enjoy. Trees and other plants are very fundamental to our ecosystem. These trees are the main reason why our atmosphere is 21% oxygen, allowing all life forms to flourish. Trees take in CO2 from the atmosphere and water from the ground. Through this, it releases oxygen and creates glucose, a form of energy. This process is famously known as photosynthesis, and the chemistry term is carbon fixation. It turns inorganic carbon into organic compounds, such as oxygen. These plants use carbon to create their own food, and surprisingly, oxygen is just a byproduct of the plant trying to survive. Over 30% of the Earth's landmass is composed of trees, and 45% of the carbon stored on land is in forests. These plants also serve as a basis of the food chain. Now moving on, carbon is released naturally and unnaturally in the atmosphere. A natural way for carbon to be released into the atmosphere is through volcanic eruptions. The annual amount of carbon dioxide released by volcanoes is around 300 to 400 metric tons. However, this is a natural occurrence, and only 50 to 70 volcanoes erupt each year. Now, we will discuss what happens when rocks store carbon. In the atmosphere, carbon dioxide combines with water, which forms carbonic acid. Eventually, it begins to rain and some of the acid may fall onto rocks. The formula for carbonic acid is H2O reacts with CO2 to produce H2CO3. Carbonic acid is a weak acid, but over time it can deteriorate rocks and the rock may dissolve. This then releases calcium, magnesium, potassium, and sodium ions. If a river is able to catch these ions, it will bring it into the ocean and release those ions. The calcium ions along with bicarbonate ions in the ocean form calcium carbonate. This allows carbon to be stored in limestone and other rocks in the ocean. And the general formula for calcium carbonate is H2O plus CO2 plus CaCO3 to produce Ca2 plus 2HCO3 minus. Carbon is also stored in many animals. Much of the human diet consists of meat. A chicken has 6.9 kilos of carbon, which we consume. We may also consume other types of meat, like beef, which has 27 kilos of carbon, about the same amount as driving 63 miles. These foods are very tasty, and it's not just meat that consists of carbon. The average vegetable has 2 kilos of carbon. Fun fact, 18% of our bodies are made out of carbon. Food also fuels the food chain. In the ocean, it starts with microorganisms and phytoplanktons. Then, fish eat those planktons, and larger animals eat those fish, and so on. This also keeps the carbon cycle going. This also happens on land. Some animals eat the grass or leaves, and then tougher animals consume them. Humans are fortunate enough to be on top of the food chain, with access to virtually any type of food. Volcanoes aren't the only way carbon is released into the atmosphere. The burning of fossil fuels is on that list as well. Power plants and industrial factories produce tons of carbon. Approximately, they produce 10 billion tons of CO2 each year. This excess amount of carbon produced by humans leaves more carbon in the atmosphere because the carbon cycle cannot go fast enough to recycle all the carbon that mankind produces. This is also known as the carbon footprint. Burning trees also releases tons of carbon and is detrimental to the environment because trees are a main component of the carbon cycle. As we stated before, trees take CO2 and water, allowing them to form oxygen. Trees also help the soil underneath them capture carbon. The formula for photosynthesis is 6 CO2 plus 6 H2O, plus light energy, which is the sun, produces C6H12O6 plus 6O2. From last year's Australian wildfires, 830 tons of carbon were released. Deforestation also slows the carbon cycle down. Much of our daily lives revolve around carbon. It is released when we drive, most commonly. This also does not account for the high amounts emitted through planes, buses, trains, and other vehicles. The average car driver releases 4.6 tons of carbon dioxide each year. This goes through the combustion reaction and is generally fuel plus O2, produces CO2 and H2O. Fuel in this case is gasoline, and every gallon produces 8,887 grams of carbon dioxide. So now that we wrapped up the main components of the carbon cycle, we can review the terms a little bit. We know where carbon is stored. Carbon may be stored in rocks and in the ocean through carbonic acid rain. Carbon is also stored in living organisms like you and I, as well as animals. We also now know how it is released. Through power plants, factories, cars, volcanoes, and the burning of forests. Main waste carbon is recycled is through trees. They go through the process of photosynthesis, and every other plant goes through this process as well. The ocean has phytoplankton and algae to perform photosynthesis. This also creates the basis of the food chain. Although carbon dioxide may seem like a negative aspect, it also has lots of benefits to our society. After all, the food we eat to the bodies we have are made out of carbon. Earth's natural way of recycling carbon does wonders for our world. So let's make sure that we keep it healthy by slowly reducing carbon emissions. Thank you all for watching this video. I hope you learned something today.